half to the soldiers and then half to the Israelites. So they made out pretty good then.
Yeah, of what they brought back.
Yeah.
The soldiers were fairly rich.
Then we get to Numbers 32, which is kind of confusing. And different commentaries have different views on this.
Back in 31 though,
Yeah.
that gold and silver that they brought back to the Lord, in the commentaries I read, said that was like over 400 pounds of gold.
Whoa.
You know, so
Yeah,
it was quite immense. Yeah.
$1,600 an
It
ounce.
says 420 pounds here.
yeah,
In today's rate, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's a lot of gold.
And that it does say was given to God. You know.
All from bracelets and rings and everything else.
Armlets and-
Why would God only take a certain small portion? It wasn't 10%, was it?
No, Yeah, because I was looking for the tithe, but for
It was like 2%.
some reason there was, yeah.
One out of every 50 would be 2%.
So for some reason the tithe didn't apply here. And I couldn't find any commentary about why the tithe didn't apply.
Again, a lot of specifics.
Yep. So, Numbers 32. So, some commentaries suggest that this is a conversation the conversation between the three tribes and Moses was a miscommunication. Others see it as a negotiation, where the tribes made an offer to Moses, Moses counter-offers, then the three tribes come back. And we see that as we read through it. And whichever message the Bible intended to communicate, God's will was still done. Because all 12 tribes still did go into battle. The land was taken over, and the land was received by the Israelites as promised by God. So if it was a transaction, an argument, a misunderstanding, we don't exactly know what happened, but God's will was still done.
So they're kind of wanting to set their own rules
Yeah.
and go against God.
Yeah. And you see in verse 5, the three tribes go to Moses and they say, if we have found favor in your eyes, let this land be given to your servants, the rich land on the other side of the Jordan. Do not make us cross the Jordan. And to me, that's where they're going against the will of God. Because God says, I'm going to give you the promised land. This is yours. But here they're saying, don't make us cross. Because they found some land that was more suitable to them for their
Livestock.
herds, their livestock. And I wrote a little note for myself. At my first reading of this, I can't believe that some of the Israelites are still rejecting God's gift of the promised land. But in all things we should reserve judgment until we know the whole story. And then as we see in the next couple of verses, Moses wasn't that patient. Moses immediately says, you guys are wrong, and he starts reading them the Riot Act. But even though these tribes did not accept God's gift of the promised land, God blessed them anyway. He allowed them to have that land, and they were prosperous.
So verse 11, they did not follow me wholeheartedly, no, one of those who were 20 years old get out of Egypt.
Yeah, Moses is reading them the Riot Act. He's saying, don't you remember when God first told us to go to the promised land, and they didn't do it? The whole first generation died.
But how much do we do that today is we see something we like, and so we say, well, okay, this is what we want, instead of waiting for what is best.
Right.
And then pray later for our mistakes.
Instead of praying, saying, okay, I'll wait, Lord, when it's time, it's time. You'll show me the way to go.
But you couldn't purchase that virtue.
Yeah. In verse 15, Moses tells them, if you turn away from following him, he will again leave all his people in the wilderness, and he will be the cause of their destruction. So, Moses is saying, don't you don't you remember what happened? Some commentaries suggest that Moses was completely justified in his reaction because the Hebrew word to cross, some commentaries say that's ambiguous and it may mean to conquer. So back in verse 5 when they said, do not make us cross the Jordan, some commentaries say what that actually means is, don't make us cross the Jordan and fight.
Part of their deal was they promised to go ahead and help conquer Canaan, but not all the time they followed through.
Right, right. Now, I looked at Strong's Concordance, and their definitions of that word don't back up what this one commentary said. So, I don't put too much weight behind that commentary. But that was someone's idea. Verses 18 and 19. So, the three tribes come back. If this really is a negotiation, they made their proposal, Moses came back with his reasoning, and now the three tribes come back with their counteroffer. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites has received their inheritance. We will not receive any inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan, because our inheritance has come to us on the east side of the Jordan. So other commentaries say, well, that's their proposal. Okay, we'll go, we'll help them fight to get what God promised them, but then we'll come back and take over the land if you give it to us.
Were they gonna stay in an area where they wiped out all the cities and towns?
Yeah, all
So on
those,
this map, they were to the east.
yeah, let's see if we can find out where they're at.
Were they up by the Dead Sea?
Yeah, let's see here.
Moab,
Where's the Jordan?
Eden, Midian is farther south.
Okay.
So if all the armies were wiped out, they had to kind of start over and build pens and cities and.
Yep.
Well, at the time they're talking right now, yeah, they were across from Jericho.
Mhm.
They're up by Mount Nebo.
So they were way, way north.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so later on, they say that there's pretty much nothing there, so they have to build their pens. And then Moses comes back to answer the counteroffer, starting in verse 20. Then Moses said to them, if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for battle, and if all of you who are armed cross over to the Jordan before the Lord, until he has driven his enemies out before him, then when the land is subdued before the Lord, you may return and be free from your obligation to the Lord and to Israel. And this land will be your possession before the Lord. So Moses is saying, okay, if you do help us out, we'll give you this land, you come back, and it's yours. But if you fail to do this, in verse 23, you will be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out.
That's kind of a big verse.
Yeah,
I'd say, Lord help you, because he's not gonna be happy.
right.
We know what happens. Insta burn, ground opens up, anything could
Swallows
happen.
you up.
Anything could happen.
Right.
The MP player microphone on there will record all the nasty you said and thought.
Yeah. So Moses is saying, all right, so if you carry this out, then you can have what you want. Build cities for your women and children and pens for your flocks, but do what you have promised. And
So they just didn't wanna move anymore.
well, like I said, they found lands that were
Land
good for their
good for the
their
herds. Right.
herds.
That's a nice pasture land.
Yeah, and that's where they wanted to stay. But they still had to carry out their vows.
What families were those?
That was the Reubenites, Gadites, and then part of,
Manasseh.
yeah, part of Joseph's family, half of Joseph's Manasseh family. So it's actually 2.5 families instead of three tribes.
Got it.
So they all decided to hang out there. Then Moses gave orders about them to Eleazar the priest and Joshua son of Nun and to the family heads of the Israelite tribes. He said to them, if the Gadites and Reubenites, every man armed for battle, cross the Jordan with you before the Lord, then when the land is subdued before you, you must give them the land of Gilead as their possession. But if they do not cross the land before you as armed, they must accept their possession with you in Canaan. So Moses is relaying this to the priest, saying if they do what they said they'll do, they can come back here. Otherwise, they've got to come with us to the promised land.
So verse 38, they renamed another city. No wonder it was hard for archaeologists to figure out where everything was.
Yeah,
Every 100 years there was a name change.
I guess whoever was in charge, that tribe.
yeah, let's see if we can find Jer on the map.
Well, just look at
J-E-I-R.
the mark that's been changed so many times. It's
Ah,
tax layers that are now.
really? You got some other place to go.
Yeah. It was marked with that.
I don't see it.
I mean, all of the
Okay.
changed names and everything.
So we got through that problem. They revised their oath, Moses agreed, and everything's to go ahead. Well, so what do they have here in verse 18? Stages of Israel's journey. So we have a map, the path of the Israelites. There's a website that I have in footnote 18. Well, of course, I didn't need my number for you guys. It's like 13 pages long, so I didn't print it out, but it's a really good detailed account of the stops that the Israelites made along the way. So if you guys go to that website, read it, and fill in the blanks.
Wow, next, okay.
So what would you predict? They traveled 30 different places? And not all, well, 33 finally starts giving some of the detail, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I thought one of my commentaries said that they had mentioned 40.
40 stops.
Maybe an appropriate number.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Ba-dum-bum.
All the time. Seems like they always do.
Okay, what else do we have there?
We're on the last 3 chapters.
Did they ever get into Midian? That's where Moses escaped from,
Numbers has
wasn't
been
it?
long.
Well, let's see.
Because on this map, it doesn't show it, but
Well, then we'll do
that's
Deuteronomy,
where he
then New
went.
Testament.
Got his wife, was there 40
Three
years.
figures we
maybe?
should
Yeah, it
finish up
doesn't look
Moses.
like it.
Even though he's finished soon.
No. They didn't, well, of course, we don't have the border of Midian, but it'd be nice if they, we'll have to find a map that gives the borders. Of course, they probably don't know that, do they? I don't have any solid definition of the different nations. So not too many footnotes in 33.
It's like a travel map.
It's like a travelogue.
Yeah. The GPS of his trip. Who left where they were.
Yeah.
Because doesn't he go in the next 3 chapters? Moses dies.
Moses goes home. Yeah, I don't have too many footnotes in here. The only footnote I've got, well, a couple. Verse 12, the desert of sin. That's related to Sinai, not our English word sin.
Oh.
So we shouldn't think of that as a totally bad place. That's about it. And then in verse 55, we get to God's first option for holy war. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, those you allow to remain will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your side. So what God is saying, you have to drive out, your first option when you go into a pagan land is to drive those people out. If you don't, they're just going to cause you trouble. And that's where the holy war happens.
God didn't really make it easy for them. He gave them lands, promised lands that were occupied by others.
Right.
So they had to work for what they got.
Yep,
Good analogy for life.
yeah, exactly. Nothing's easy. Even once you become a Christian, we know it's not an easy life. God never promises us an easy life. Matter of fact, He tells us it's going to be tough. They'll hate you because they hated me first. So, don't look for an easy life. It's not out there. So we got 3 more chapters of Numbers. We learned a lot in Numbers. We learned that it's not all census. We learned that it's not all numbers.
Sacrifice.
Some sacrifice. And we'll find out the same in Deuteronomy when we get in that in 2 weeks.
How long is Deuteronomy? Is that as long? Oh, here, I can look up in my phone, sweetie, I'm sorry.
Well, you asked the question, so we'll find out.
I know, I'm just curious.
So like today, we've got
34.
34 chapters.
34, so pretty similar. We had 36 in Numbers, we'll have 34 in Deuteronomy.
I don't know.
And then we're going to New Testament?
Then we'll go to Matthew.
Ah,
So what we'll do is we'll go, once we get through the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, then we'll keep going Old Testament, New Testament. Because what we found in Leviticus was that the Old Testament ties so well to the New Testament. We saw so many things in Leviticus that told us about the sacrifices and how it tied into Jesus' sacrifice. So at that point, we decided, hey, let's do that. Let's go between Old Testament and New Testament.
That's what we want.
Yeah, we're on Leviticus right now. We get together every night and we read a chapter together.
Oh,
That's what
excellent.
we're on is Leviticus. And she just said that it's kind of similar to the New Testament.